Yes, sir.
It's it's inconceivable, and yet you lived that and you went through it, Tara. This is the courage you have. This is the courage our beloved sister
And
has right now.
and I think, I mean, obviously, the worst part was her being taken from me. So not only did I have the guilt of contemplating suicide the night before she she died, so in my mind I'm like, well, I didn't know God. I didn't know how God worked. I didn't know he was a loving God. I said, this is God's way of punishing me. This is God's way of punishing me to show me how precious life is.
Mm.
And so I blame myself for that. And I blame myself for the lie about who her father really was. So I felt responsible, although he's the one that took her breath from her. I felt responsible on more levels than one. Um, so after her death, I just I gave up. I gave up on hope. I gave up on life. My life wasn't great before then, but I still felt like I had a good part inside of me somewhere. And I still loved life. I still felt like I'm young, I'm gonna make something of my life. I've just been, sidetracked. It's gonna be hard with the babies, but I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna make something of myself. And when when something like that happens to you and you have nothing to lean on, you don't have comfort, you don't have a relationship with Christ, you don't have any peace or sense of understanding of why things happen, that you are left to, you're vulnerable. You're vulnerable to sin, to addiction, to grief, to shame, to guilt. You have no protection. You know what I mean? You don't have a relationship.
Mhm.
Without a relationship with Christ, you are out in a battlefield with no armor,
Right.
with no protection.
So
And
true.
not long after she passed, I had actually went to uh, a church service with my little stepsister at the time, and I was just so full of grief. And I went down the altar. I said, you know what? I'm going to get saved. And I knew, and even the pastor at the altar told me, said, why are you here? Why are you? And I said, because I want to see my daughter again. That's because I want to see my daughter again. And he said, Tara, that's not how this works. That's not, you can't just say, okay, I accept Christ. And, that's not how this works. He said, it has to be real. It has to come from your heart. And it wasn't. It was solely because I was grieving. So I knew I wasn't saved then. But so after that, like I said, I got lost. More lost than I was. I started, you would think that losing a child would make you closer to the child that you have left, but it didn't. It didn't. I I can't even explain it. I didn't care anymore. I didn't care anymore. And I began to just really, I couldn't be a mother anymore. I could not be a mother anymore. Not only the responsibility aspect, my my heart was gone. And I was filled with so much anger towards God and towards everybody and hurt that I was no good for her. So I began to neglect her, not in a physical sense, I mean, in a relationship sense. My grandparents actually took her in and really raised her while I went about my way. I was there, but I wasn't there. I wasn't raising her. Um, so I fell right back into everything that I had gotten away from. The drugs, the sex, the partying, the crime, the just selfishness, and I didn't care anymore. I didn't care what happened to me and have any hope for the future at all. Um, Ended up getting in another very toxic relationship, and while this one wasn't abusive, it was just a dead end. And I ended up having another child. Aniston died when I was 16. I had my now 14-year-old son at 18, and I just couldn't bond. I was so afraid to love him. I was afraid to love him and him be taken from me. So I don't even think I really held him a lot until he was over the age that Anna died. I was just really in no position to be a mother. I really wasn't. So as time goes on, a lot of things happen with my son's dad, and a lot of very, very bad things with him hurting young girls. And
So
I've
he was abusive as well.
got, well, not physically,
Mm-hmm.
but on my 20th birthday, he disappeared, and he came back the next morning with an unconscious preteen in the back of the truck. And I called the police, and he went away for a long time. And yeah, so that's pretty much, my life was crazy at the point. I had gotten into methamphetamines by that point. I was 19, 20 years old. And when I came back to Florida after that, and I had my kids with me while I was up there with him, and there were days I couldn't feed them. I mean, it was just, I was in a really dark spot. So when I came back to Florida, um, I didn't have a place to live. I stayed in my sister's little apartment with this rambunctious 2-year-old and my other daughter, and I didn't have any money. I'd never worked. I didn't have any skills. Like, all I had was a broken heart and a lot of deep-rooted issues. So I met a man who had just gotten out of a 30-year prison sentence for murder, actually. And he said, I can help you. I will. He was selling drugs. He said, if you can, I can't go in these places anymore to sell drugs because they've done caught me. So you get hired there. You go in, you sell these drugs. And it was actually a nude club, and I needed the money. So I agreed. And from that point on, my life really spiraled. I was selling a lot of drugs, doing a lot of drugs, just completely disrespecting myself. And I thought I was empowered when really I was not doing myself any service, but I had the means that I needed to take care of my family, my kids and my sister, my mom. I had more money than I knew what to do with. And if anything, that taught me that wasn't even the problem because I had this huge void in my heart. I had everything I ever wanted. I thought I was young. I was beautiful. I was very, I was wealthy. I thought, that's the reason why. I thought that was the missing piece that I didn't have all these years. And now that I have it, I'm like, wait a minute. I still feel empty inside. So, everything just spiraled from drug to drug, from man to man, from jail to jail. I did a lot of things that I'm not proud of. Um, During the course of my adult entertainment industry, I was actually approached by a man who said, "Hey, I'm going to take you to Orlando. You're going to, go to these clubs up there, do all these private parties. It's going to be you're going to really make a name for yourself." I was 21 at the time. And I had always thought that I was a very, smart, street savvy person, and I was. That's why I haven't shared the story a lot, because I'm like, God, I can't believe I fell for this. But I was actually being kidnapped, sexually trafficked. Right when I got there, I was passed off to a stranger, locked into an apartment. Like, I literally had to escape. And after that, once again, broken. Came back, just more drugs, more. It was wild. um, so eventually, um, I met someone else. I started to straighten up a little bit, and I had my now 8-year-old, and then I had twins a couple years later, twin boys, who I was actually going to give up for adoption, and then I found out it was twins, and I decided to keep them because in the dancing days I had, not many people know this, that's why it's vulnerable. I had a late term abortion with identical twin girls, and I struggled for a long time with that. And finally, years and years later, I had 6 years to be exact. I broke one night and I got on my knees and I actually prayed to God, like really prayed to God. And I said, please, forgive me for this. Just please forgive me, because I felt the guilt from that, because I had it done out of just pure selfishness, my body, my choice, none of that. No, it was strictly because I felt like they were going to interrupt my life. They were going to stop what I had going on. It was just selfishness. So I asked God to forgive me for that. And not long after that, I found out that not only was I pregnant again, but that it was twins. And when I heard that it was twins, I said, I can't give these babies up. I've got, I'm keeping these babies. And I was in a bad situation then, but I was sober. But I said, these babies are a gift from God. This is my sign that I'm forgiven. Like, I did keep them. Jacob and Jonah, they're 5 years old. When the twins were babies, I fell back. I fell right back into hard drugs. I told myself it was to stay awake, and part of it was. But then, like every addiction does, it overtakes you. You lose control. You can only lie to yourself for so long and say that you have it under control before it takes over. And not only did I get on drugs, when their father caught me using, I talked him into getting high with me, which is something that he had never done. And I created a monster. And I'm still having a hard time forgiving myself for it to this day, because he's still on that path, 5-6 years later. And so I got him using too. So it was started with coke, then meth, and heroin, and the meth is really the only thing that I stuck with I stuck with it, and you couldn't tell me nothing. I felt like I wasn't hurting anybody, although I was. um, so after I got him on board with drug usage, um, everything fell apart. Everything fell apart. We lost everything. And in this time frame, I was in my house one day watching the twins play in the living room like I always did, and they were 16 months old. And my twin Jacob just collapsed and started seizing. His pupils were dilating and going from pinpoint to as big as they could, and he was seizing and in and out of consciousness and not breathing. And after a long stay at an intensive care unit by myself, mind you, still addicted, I find out that it's his brain. It wasn't some isolated incident or fever. My son has a brain deformity called focal cortical dysplasia and a rare syndrome called Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, which causes mental retardation and every kind of seizure, not just one, and it's medication resistant. And to watch my baby seize uncontrollably and not be able to help him and have doctors telling me, he'll never be normal. He'll never, that he wasn't who I thought he was. I thought that just my happy, normal, healthy boy. And to find out that, on top of dealing with this deep, deep addiction with not only me, but his father, I was barely holding it together then. So then to find out that my son has some, serious health conditions that require, around the clock care and monitors. And, I'm having to give him CPR on a regular basis. And having already lost one child, to sit there and have to give CPR to another, I was a disaster, to say the least. I was an absolute disaster. And you would think that would slow me down or say, okay, Terry, you've got to get your crap together. You've got to be here for this baby. And I couldn't. I still had to take care of him physically, but as far as me, I dove deeper into drugs.
Yeah, and Tara, you're addicted at this point. The drugs have taken over, essentially, addiction.
Yeah.
So you are at the mercy of a physiological or chemical imbalance that makes you somebody that you aren't at this point. You are truly driven by the drugs, aren't you?
Well, I had always, from 17 years old, been driven by drugs or alcohol. It was just different ones. I would just trade in one for the next. I would use one to get off of whatever I was really bad on. Like I used cocaine to stop drinking. I used heroin to come off cocaine. I used Xanax to get off. Like it was just an endless cycle until the meth, until the, my heavy. That was the one thing that it got me. Like, and it took hold of me, and it didn't let go, and I didn't want it to let go. Um, I'd like to say that I tried to get clean and I struggled to get clean and I kept relapsing, but that's not the case. I did not even want to try to get clean. I wanted to want to, but I didn't. I watched everything fall apart around me, and I still just wanted to get high. Um, it got to the point where I was living in an empty, abandoned house that I had to put boards on the window and couldn't turn lights on at night in fear of getting caught. And, no food. I think one of my lowest moments was in the dark in that house one night and hearing my disabled son. I could hear him seizing and I couldn't find him. Just crawling around in the dark looking for him. And that was a low moment. That breaking into homes just to feed them, like it was rough. But not long after that, by the grace of God, I got arrested. I got arrested, and my twin boys, that those were my do-over babies. Those were the babies that I said, these are babies are a gift from God. And look what I had done with it. I knew that they were a gift from God, and I still I screwed up. So I went to jail, and
you went to jail for theft then? Is that?
no. I actually went to jail for possession.
Possession.
Yes, I had yeah, on a grocery store trip with my daughter, actually. I went to jail for possession. Um and so I went to jail that time, and the twins were they were taken from me. And I was actually, when I got arrested, they were with their heroin addict, meth addict father. And what had actually happened, how they got taken from me, is when I went to jail, he was left at the house with them. So I was petrified. Because I knew he couldn't, I was afraid something was going to happen to them, and it did. The police actually came to the house looking for him on a different matter, and he jumped out the window, and he left our boys inside, not even 2 years old. One of them being handicapped and having, real medical issues. He left them inside and ran, and he didn't tell anybody immediately. So it's kind of unclear how long the boys were left in the house by themselves. But so naturally the state came in and took the boys. Thank God. Thank God the state came and took the boys, and that was they were put in foster care. And out of everything I had ever, done with my other children, I was obviously a horrible mother. But, my family had always, I knew where they were. They were safe. They were with my family. I knew that when I got my life, straightened out, I could get them back. I could still see them, but for them to be at the mercy of the state was just a real, it's a real gut punch for me, and sorry.
No,
Um,
no.
so I got
So
out of jail
many,
that.
a culmination of all of these emotions and, resurrecting all of these painful memories. But you are, at this point, you're serving time and your children have been taken away, and, you're still drug addicted. And I have to say, Tara, that we love you. We love you. We have the love of Jesus for those of us like you who have that love, and that not only does he love us, but he likes us, he likes you, he likes hanging out with you, he loves you more than you can possibly imagine, and you're with
And he loves
friends.
me. What really just it brought me to my knees just the other day when I was reading about, how he knew us before, he formed us. And I said, dang, that means he knew already that I was gonna do all these things and deny him and live so sinfully and just be a terrible person. He knew this before, and he still chose to save me. And
One of his favorites, by the way, was somebody like that, like you. Mary Magdalene was one of the closest to Jesus because she has been forgiven much. She knew that she was loved much, and she devoted her life to Jesus, as did, the disciples and others. But she, of all of them, knew the extent of God's grace. But
exactly.
back to your story. So you have, your children have been taken into emergency foster care. You're serving time right now, so let's continue if you're able and willing to do that with
I'm
what
good.
happened.
So I got out of jail that time, which that time was actually a real blessing to me. And let me tell you why. I laid in that cell for, gosh, almost 2 weeks, just withdrawing from heroin and fentanyl, cold turkey, nothing. And I needed that. It was probably one of the most awful, physical, just, it was awful. I don't know if you know anything about heroin withdrawals, but that's why there are so many addicts right now, because they're scared of withdrawals. Like, they don't want to experience it. That's why they're so, um, I can't think of the word I'm saying. That's why they're so committed to staying high, because they don't want to experience those. But I was able to withdraw, and I'm proud to say that was in 2018 when I got out, and I had never touched heroin again. Even, even still broken, I've never touched it again. So I needed that arrest, which was a short one. So I got out, and um, losing the boys and knowing that I would have to please the state to get them back, I I gave it the best. I gave it my all. Um, let me just say this: I gave it my all, um, as a still broken person, as a godless person, as a lost person. I gave it my all, but there's certain things that you can't overcome without Christ, and I've proven that time and time again in my life. Um, you can change your habits, you can change your friends, but if you don't take care of the reasons why you keep going back to the things that you did and why you keep falling, um, you're just going to keep trying to fill that void with things that only Christ can fill. But so I gave it my all. I said, I'm not going to lose my children, not going to lose my children. And I started doing a case plan. I started renting a room from a friend. I was drinking a lot, but I wasn't doing drugs yet. I was really, really, I was doing all my classes. I was really trying